pace, the means by which communication is exchanged, and how we all receive information and communicate, and the power in those instruments and those tools, if we are aware of the power over us and the power to which we can actually exercise our own empowerment if we are truly aware. I'm going to take a step back. Notice we started here with these venerated ancestors, and we're going to go back to Birth of the Nation, 1915, D.W. Griffith, who, this movie was the first movie screened at the White House, in front of Woodrow Wilson and his family, President Woodrow Wilson and his family. So the story tells the story of Birth of the Nation, from the end of the Civil War, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, through the rise of the reinitiation of the Ku Klux Klan. We're going to take a quick excerpt from here, just for reference purposes. It's basically two families that are the main story of the Northern abolitionist family and a Southern family that was pro-slavery. shows, morning shows in the country, probably on the land, on the planet, iHeart Radio, which is a digital, and they were having a discussion. And he was there to talk about the Congo, but he also veered off a little bit into domestic politics and voting.
Is like poverty like crazy?
I'm not saying the whole more, but I'm saying some of them stoops. I watched The Wire. I seen The Wire.
But there's no reason why with a port there that people should be so impoverished, right? And this is what Marcus Garvey was trying to do with his Black Star Liner. There should be a shipping company. There should be an airport that's black owned. There should be black owned commerce coming from Africa to the port in Baltimore and vice versa. Trade should be done directly. Shouldn't have to do trade with a government that's going to steal from them anyway. Because, I mean, shit. if we get into talking about government, I know that you guys sometimes have political people on here. At the same time as all of the things that I've just said are happening, it was funded by the US government. Mm-hmm. Like they literally funded it and went in there and are protecting their interests, etc., etc. And we argue about this stuff often. Should you vote Republican? Should you vote Democrat? And it's like we say in Rasta like in fact indigenous people say this, but Rasta people say this as well. Is two wings of the same bird is still the same bird. And when we're given these systems to vote on, we're not given an opportunity to actually create change. We're just given an opportunity to reinstate the same system with a blue or a red symbolism on it. And
throughout the world, nothing changes regardless of who is in the White House. Their interest will be their interest.
Right.
Regardless, America has an interest. No matter who is in that White House, Republican, Democrat.
But I'm speaking to Black America. Because Black America is powerful enough to be able to make its own decisions for what it wants to do with its own destiny. And you see the exodus to Ghana right now.
Yeah.
Like right now, me and my friends, shout out to I don't even know how to announce it, but we're about to start building a city in Ghana, like a whole city of the diaspora to go home to. And we were there like a few weeks ago and living nice. Living nice. You been to Ghana?
We'll come back to this as well. I will point out, again, when we talk about social media and commentaries, what propaganda is. We started with D.W. Griffith and clearly racist imagery, right? That is used to incite and to denigrate. When you have two educated young brothers and their opinion on politics. I'm going to go to one more. I know Ice Cube of NWA fame, Big Three, the Friday franchise, among other things.
Yo, what's up? This your homie Ice Cube. Here to talk to my black folks. I just want to be straight up because there's a lot of messages going out about this election. First and foremost, anybody telling you that you gotta vote, that it's your duty, that you have to exercise the right, and that people die for you to vote. For one, people did die, but nobody walked out their house to go die for you to vote. They were killed by probably some racists that don't want to see us get anything. But I'm saying that to say this. Be skeptical of anybody telling you to vote and not telling you to ask for anything, or to tell you to just vote and not to get anything for your vote. That's not how it works. That's not the process. You don't vote just to vote. You vote because you're getting something or your community is getting something. So everybody that's telling you that, man, look at them and say, what are you getting? Because people that just want you to vote and not ask for nothing, people that's in power that want you to vote but don't want you to get anything or not asking for you to get anything economically, they suspect. Straight up. Because a lot of people been in place for a long time and we ain't got shit. That shit gonna end. That shit gonna end. We gonna get what we supposed to get. Period. And anybody asking you not to ask, I wouldn't listen to you. Because that's the process. Every community asks for what they want. And we're going to do the same goddamn thing.
So that's how we want to set the table for the rest of this conversation, right? Understanding what propaganda is, what information is. Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's how we want to proceed. We always want to have a context when we're having conversations. We want to collect as much information and data as possible such that we can analyze the information coming in, manipulate it properly. We can arrive at new understandings, right, with regards to whatever it is we're discussing. So why do we start with Birth of a Nation and the media at its film, at its genesis in this country? And the fact that, interestingly enough, at the heart of that story, at the heart of that film was Black people and voting, exercising the franchise in Congress. Why is that the case? And why do we look at the current state of affairs in social media? And now, people of the community, maybe some folk who don't study and aren't as well read as others with regards to the history of politics and the importance of the franchise and how to actually exercise it and use it, giving bite-sized snippets and clips, glib with regards to why vote, why not vote, what you're supposed to get out of voting, notice and Shaka Bar's commentary, right? Very reasonable assertion, right? The one that he says in the Caribbean, two wings of the same bird. Growing up, my family's from the Caribbean, they would say the blood clot. Heckle and Jekyll, right? Heckle and Jekyll, right? Again, simple, witty truth to a certain degree, but to take that truth and then paint it over the entire thing, the franchise that people did in fact shed blood for. A franchise that other people on the other side, who are adverse to your interests, seem to continue to put a lot of effort, considerable effort and energy in preventing the exercise of that very same franchise. Someone said thinks it's valuable how the information is used and how to analyze it. Shaka Bar's ended his little son. He ended that snippet there, and he had moved on to a very luxurious notion. Black Americans are powerful. Yes. We can do whatever we want. Sure. steps, no strategy. Don't anybody who tell you to vote be skeptical. Sure. Exercise skepticism, critical thinking is absolutely the case. Wise advice. In the context of voting and anything else in life. But when we're talking, when someone gets on social media and provides something so shallow on the subject that is so very deep, we have to take a look at that. We have to take a step back and make sure that we have all of the information that's necessary to make a good decision. We're going to come to, we have a video on this, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. Take another. I want to go to something else first. Ferguson, 2020. The start of the Black Lives Matter. There was a firestorm in our community, police brutality, and everyone across the country became activated because police had murdered a young man in our community, Mike Brown, and we wanted to see justice done. There was a process that took place, you all recall, and ultimately the local district attorney made a decision to not prosecute the police officers who murdered that man. There was a series of protests in conjunction with other murders that occurred around the United States, and there was the entire country was caught up in the emotion and the swell. And a lot of things were born out of those moments, that flash, that spark. You had the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, going across all corporations and into the federal government. A little known fact about Ferguson, Missouri, or a fact that is underreported, is that over 70% of the population in Ferguson is African American. At the time that the sheriff and the cops and the DA who made the decision not to charge and the mayor made those decisions that they made, the majority of the people in that town were African American. So how is it? How is it possible that in that time when essentially voting, right? Everyone can vote. How is it that the sheriff, the DA, the judge, and the mayor, who all played a role not only in the murder of that young man, but in making the decision that the murderer would go free, were all not of the community, had no real tie to the people in that town. The majority of the people in that town, the majority, they were the minority. They were literally the majority in that town. Local elections. The local election had a very real consequence in that case. And while everyone was marching, everyone was up in arms, and everyone was talking about justice and what needs to happen, was anyone out there talking about mobilizing for Black and brown people in every single town, in every single hamlet, in every single village, in every single district throughout the for a dog catcher, for a state legislature, for your mayor, for the head of the sanitation department. You know that the DAs are elected positions. The top cop, the sheriff in town gets elected. So oftentimes, again, the power of the franchise is lost because the conversation we're having is surface and it continually misses the point, which is you do indeed have a power with the franchise that if executed and exercised with a strategy on the ground can build towards something else. You can get to Ghana, absolutely. 100%. But how do you get there? Maybe you don't want to get to Ghana. Maybe you want DC statehood. Maybe you want statehood for Puerto Rico. It would be nice. An extra 4 senators thinking progressively, activating, agitating for the interests of the people in the Senate. 4 senators. South Dakota and North Dakota got 4. There's like, and Wyoming got 6. There's like 11 people in those 3 states combined. How do you get to DC statehood? How do you get to Puerto Rico statehood? If you want to stay here. You vote for your dog catcher, you vote for your school board, you vote for council, you vote for sanitation, you vote for your sheriff. You vote, you exercise the franchise, and you exercise the franchise diligently and consistently, and you start right where you live. Which brings us back to Lowndes County in Alabama. There's a book that was written where I learned about when I was kind of actually read it first. The book is called Black Power, written by Stokely Carmichael and Charles B. Hammond. And what initially drew me to that book was when first of all, Stokely Carmichael was from Trinidad again, so it was something of a matter of personal pride first, but also his name changed his name to Kwame Ture. But the book was written here on this campus. The research for Black Power, the writing was done on this soil. And it meant something to me. I wanted to look into it. And as I read, I learned about Lowndes County. And get it right. Lowndes County Freedom Organization. Back in 1966, Lowndes County was 80% African American. 80%. 1966. 0% of the African American population in Lowndes County at the time were registered to vote. 80% of the population, 0% registered to vote. Community organized, and amidst some of the most egregious violence, when the face of threats of violence, and not just threats, but acts of violence, consistent violence, consistent deterrence, activated and organized and walked to the polls and started a political movement in the face of the entire system. It wasn't just the local sheriff who was aligned against them. It wasn't just the local business owner who was aligned against them. 2 years ago, Raphael Warnock was elected as a senator for the state of Georgia. There's a direct line right now from Lowndes County to the senator who's sitting in the United States Senate. How did that happen? It started on the ground. It started in a state. It started in a county. cities, these people have power. What can I do? Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898. There was a racial massacre and a coup where a coalition government of African American people and aligned white population were running the city, the largest city in North Carolina. And notice the date, I didn't say 1998, it was 1898. 24 years after the end of slavery in this country, the end of the Civil War. There was a full-blown coalition government where African Americans held 4 seats on the city council, had control of the local government. How did they do that? They organized for votes and they entered into a coalition government. They found other members in the town, right? Republican, the party, and it was a Democratic party. They aligned themselves with the Republicans. They said, we don't have enough numbers on our own, but if we enter into a coalition government with you, we can arrive at a degree of power for ourselves. Now again, notice I start off with the racial massacre and the coup. It didn't end so well in 1898. They were run out of town. African Americans were murdered as a result of them exercising the franchise and planning and strategizing and being smart. The reaction from the other culture, from the other folk, was violence. But again, all of it is information. All of it, from my perspective, is information that you and we can all use. One, organizing on the local level does in fact work. Two, certain types of coalition governments, if we're talking about numbers and voting, also is a viable option. We'll get back to coalition. Three, next time around, you might want to be prepared for the reaction that may come when you exercise the vote, when you begin to get more power and take more control. The reaction, we're all very familiar with Black Wall Street, I'm sure. It's also Oklahoma. Right? So the reaction that has happened in the past, again, is good. All the information from my perspective is good information. But we start with the facts as they are, which is exercising of the franchise on a local level that begins to bring power together to begin to build real power bases is a viable option. It's necessary if, in fact, there is a desire to begin to move to larger elections, exercise more control over government. And again, there are several examples of this. We'll go with one more modern example. Everyone's familiar with the Tea Party. The Tea Party, how did it start? Barack Obama was elected President of the United States, and at that very next midterm election, 2 years later, there was the birth of a subset within the Republican Party that was explicitly activated against Barack Obama and any and everything that he stood for. They had an agenda, right? They had a mission, they had a goal. Was there a Tea Party senator? No. Was there a Tea Party governor? Absolutely not. What they did have, they had Tea Party candidates in several districts, congressional districts around the country. And what they did was they activated and they were concerted in their efforts in small elections, congressional elections, voter registration, wherever they had any numbers. And they started midterm election, Obama took a huge hit, right? He was brought low, right? Came out and had to give a press conference. People have spoken. He had to concede, he had to make concessions. And this little Tea Party in 2010 is now what? Has now turned into what? After beginning to build small pockets of local power for themselves after only 14 years. Again, it's all information. It's all data. It all goes back to prove the point that the vote is important, the franchise is in fact power, and that using it and utilizing it with some sort of thought, with some sort of coalition, is a viable option. What I would say is do be skeptical of people who come and talk to you about the vote and why the vote. Be very skeptical of people who come and talk about not voting at all, or dismiss the notion of the franchise as a tool of power. From the Caribbean, and we use my mom, the language is like poetry. Right? So those are these examples that my mother and my grandmother would use to make a point. Voting is like a show. I won't throw it away because I can't make a cake with it. Voting has particular use. The things that it's good for. Is voting going to be a panacea for liberation of all black people around the globe? No. Does that mean I disassociate myself from the franchise and I don't put it to good use where it's useful? I can't make a cake with a screwdriver either. I can't make a cake with a weed whacker. I can't make a cake with a car. I can't make a cake with my cell phone. Right? See how absurd it gets after a while? All of these things that voting can't do and won't do. But there's a lot that it can do. There's more than enough history and object lessons for us as to not only what it can do, but when applied specifically, in specific ways, how it is in fact effective and helpful. Back to, I'm going to go back to Marcus Garvey quickly. Shaka was mentioned the Black Star Line. One of Marcus Garvey's dreams was to have a whole shipping line transit between America and Africa. He ran into some financial problems, he was very trustworthy, and he put people in charge of the business aspects of the organization who didn't know, weren't savvy. And it caused problems, people lost money, and that was the opening the government used ultimately to bring charges against him, and he was ultimately deported. Little known fact, tidbit to the Marcus Garvey story. Everyone's familiar with the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? The cops for the whole country, right? Cops Without Borders, FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, first director of FBI. Held the FBI for over 30 years, 30 or 40 years actually. The first African-American officer hired by the FBI, James Wormley Jones, was hired and brought into the FBI to spy on Marcus Garvey and his organization, to infiltrate that organization. The first time there was a black cop brought into the FBI was expressly for the purpose of infiltrating Marcus Garvey's organization. It's all data, just information. Now, what do you do with that information? What does that mean? Right? There's a lot that you can derive
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. With the re-election of Georgia Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, the first African-American Democrat elected to the Senate from the former Confederacy, and with voting rights on the chopping block at the Supreme Court in Moore v. Harper, a case that could upend democracy, we look now at a new documentary that examines how we got here. This is the trailer for Lowndes County and the road to Black Power.
If you want to go back and understand why we're having these conversations about reparations, why the racial wealth gap exists, you can do no better than looking back at Lowndes County.
Lowndes County was one of the poorest counties in the country.
It was 80% African American, and in 1965, there were no black people registered to vote in Lowndes County, Alabama.
other than these two parties because they're not really doing it. You notice in this context that third party was on the local level. If you're going to engage in third-party politics and be effective, the local place is the place to start, is to build, go back to the Tea Party, is to build a power base. Third-party elections, third-party voting at national and statewide elections, for all intents and purposes, only gets the opposition elected. Al Gore, right? Third party politics. There was another party, and most of the people who were progressive, who would have voted for Al Gore, but he wasn't progressive enough. They voted for Ralph Nader. They got George Bush. Literally. So again, the evidence is there, the examples are there, and in closing, I would just ask for all of us to slow down and consider, look at the data and information, do our research, and first and foremost, always recognize that you have power in your franchise, and by any means necessary, always exercise. Thank you.
That was great. A lot of food for thought. Any questions? Remarks? Hi, everybody. I have a question for you, Mr. Scott. What impact would college students, HBCU, particularly students, have on voting? What impact would it have?
It's a tremendous impact. Thank you for that. Because first and foremost, they're all, HBCU student bodies are already coalesced. They are already organized. They already have pre-existing power base. They're already structured geographically, culturally, socially. The mentality is already there. So the next step is to chart the actual course. But you have what's called critical mass already, if you decide to move on. There's also, the history of HBCUs in this country is also quite unique, and it also has, sort of has a foundation. So you've got present, active numbers all aligned to some extent. Every, people are different, but to some extent you're aligned. And you've got a very strong foundation to build on. There's political capital there. The former president is campaigning right now that he gave $250 million to HBCUs. Do the math on that. He actually he had a line deal. He had actually zeroed out the money to HBCUs. And a U.S. Congressperson actually put those monies back into his budget, and then he signed the budget. Initially, former President Trump actually had zeroed out the budget for HBCUs, and a local congressman was responsible for ensuring that those monies actually, in fact, get sent out to HBCUs. But you got the numbers here. There's 101 HBCUs in the country. HBCUs are a tremendous economic engine for the country. There's a new economic impact report that just came out, released by
Thank you. By the way, if you're not registered to vote yet, please, before you step out, register to vote. Any other questions or comments we can get from the audience? Questions, remarks, comments?
I don't know whether I've been loud enough.
You are.
Mine is just a comment to say that sometimes, well, I'm a visitor for those who don't know me. I'm the Fulbright Scholar in Residence here at Lincoln from South Africa. Much of my life has been spent during elections in Africa. But whenever I'm speaking to university people, students, faculties, academics, administrators, and so on, I often remind them that they mustn't forget what you've just said, the power of the vote, but it has to be generated from the university to that Senate, to that mayoral office, to Congress, and to the highest. Sometimes we don't make connections. So sometimes, as students, we think, oh, what's my vote here going to do? But we forget that there's a time when I'm going to have to leave the university if I'm not becoming an academic or maybe working in the institution. I have to go out there into the society. So that connection for me is, what I've taken from your talk. I'm also going to be contacting you to speak to you about the third-party voting because I'm interested in it. And of course, if you will break Smith, who's here, also knows that I've got a whole other issue that I'd like to learn about US elections, not only November 5, but the electoral college and the whole gamut of issues around elections, because I breathe and sleep elections on some other days. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Breathing and sleeping your research, that's powerful. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Dr. Hawkins?
I was just going to say, I show Birth of a Nation in my courses because as a reference point for where we are, where we've come from, and where we're going, and as a way of also reminding us of the way that the imageries and the tropes about Blackness and Black bodies and African bodies have remained so static, unlike any other racial and ethnic group in this country. And so thank you for showing that. And then also ending with this invitation to participate in different ways. That voting is one way, it's not the only way, it's an important way, but also local is important. Thank you.
Just one other point to that. Thank you for that, Doctor. Birth of the Nation, when you say the static nature of the images, Birth of the Nation is credited with creating the 5 archetypal stereotypes of African people that we know to this day in this country. The Tom, the Coon, the Mammy, the Buck, and the Tragic Mulatto. All of those archetypes manifest themselves in all of media to this very day. That one movie.
And the minstrel,
And the mission, yes.
but didn't create it.
No, absolutely. But Donald Bogle has a great book on that. It's probably in his 10th or 11th edition. All of the images that we see to this very day, all these images that we look at in our media of African American peoples, for the most part, you can trace every single one of them back to this movie and the images and the characters that they created to denigrate African peoples in this movie. So again, the power of propaganda. But then once you know something, you can't look at it again. You can't look at the image of an artist now, buck dancing or crooning, right? And not realize that this image didn't just pop up somewhere. This was actually crafted by someone else with a particular purpose. And then now what? Yes, thank you. Oh, yes.
time when I was a student at that time of Professor Hamilton. And what I want to say that for you guys who are attending Lincoln University, to pay strict attention to your professors, and this is how Lincoln became a place where we were able to liberate. It affected me. Professor Hamilton, he also traveled to South Africa. He knew Mandela. Black Power started, well, the ideas were written here, but it transformed the world. And I'm just emphasizing to you, the students, to take seriously what the professor here is trying to teach and what Professor Hawkins is trying to teach in your classes, and don't take it lightly. The conditions have changed, yes, but we still have a long way to go. And I just want to, and he also mentioned, I'm talking about Lincoln now, so you guys know. Remember when he talked about the birth of a nation? Well, it was a Lincoln graduate, his name is Donald Bogle, who wrote a book about Landis, Coombs, and Malala, and he graduated from Lincoln. So I'm just telling you, and he was a year ahead of me, and right now, just so you know who I am, I teach philosophy in New York City at John Jay College. But the point I'm making is that it's important for you as students to take advantage of this education, because what is the motto of Lincoln? Learn, liberate, and lead. Well, I don't want you guys to, I want you to uplift Lincoln not to be a mediocre university, but a leading university as we had in the past. And so I'm just emphasizing that, okay?
Thank you.
Questions, more comments? All right, well, thank you so much for coming. This concludes our Constitution Day Forum. And we once again thank Professor Scott for that great talk. And we'll see you next year with another Constitution Day event 2025.
Okay. I'm testing. I didn't know how to do the Zoom. I didn't know how to do the Zoom earlier.
Are you just playing with it now?
Yeah.
It's still recording.
I know. Hey, that's I know.